Show me your heart. I know that it's beating. Tell me that you love me too. So I know your heart is true. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love.
Do you like cryptocurrency, politics, economics, activism, or art? Then check out The Tatiana Show, where you can learn all about it in a fun and non-intimidating way, as if you're just hanging with friends. Go to thetatianashow.com and listen now.
I've been bad. Have you? Get ready to get slapped around on this special BDSM episode of Proof of Love. Does that make you a degenerate or just a fun, kinky friend? We're going to find out more with Stephanie Murphy. Hey, doctor, what's going on?
Hello, Mistress Tatiana.
Thank you. Thank you.
I am here to serve.
Thank you. Very, very well behaved. You will be rewarded later in due time.
Thank you,
and
mistress.
Wait, what do I call, what's the opposite of a mistress? What do I call Lauren?
A submissive. You just call her Lauren because submissives don't get a title.
They don't.
Oh.
They don't.
Lauren, welcome to the show, I guess.
Thanks for having me. I hope I'm good today.
You better be, bitch. Okay, this is going to obviously be a ridiculous show. It's the first show of the new year, actually. I'm not sure when we're going to be sharing this with you guys. But, you know, I had a friend who started dating a guy, and she's not into BDSM, and he is. And so it opened up a question in my mind, like, is this a match made in heaven? Is it like something that you can expect your partner to want? Because, you know, sometimes there's some violence involved. So there's a lot of things to unpack with this. And then there's just like a fun general discussion of BDSM. So before we get started on this kinky episode, I guess, Stephanie, since you're a doctor and you should know about these things, what is the definition of BDSM?
Yes, I'm a doctor of kink, so I know everything about it. No, I want to start out by saying, you know, I do have some experience with BDSM. So if you're in my family and you're listening to this, you might want to turn it off now. But BDSM
not
is
a parent-approved episode. Please note, this episode is not approved for parents and family members.
Right. It's a boundaries thing. You know, it's boundaries. So anyway, BDSM is an acronym, and it's a compound acronym. So it's like, it stands for bondage/discipline, domination/submission, sadism/masochism. And I think that's it. Yeah. So there's 4 letters, but there's 3 things that it stands for. And all of these are examples of playing with power, right? So in this case, it's a consensual, voluntary, pre-negotiated exchange of power. And so what that means is that usually there's one person or maybe multiple people who is in a powerful role and a person who is in a less powerful role. And they are getting sexual pleasure out of exchanging their power and acting out scenes. You'll hear this term scenes, where there is power exchange going on. And this is very, very sexy for some people. Now, you know, I think of kink and BDSM as kind of like interchangeable terms. Like when someone says something is kinky, sometimes they mean like the mainstream definition of kinky, like, oh, getting out the whipped cream when you're in bed, or the handcuffs or something, like kind of lighter stuff. But sometimes they mean really kinky, like, you know, tying someone up and peeing on them. So, you know, it just depends on what the person's meaning is when they're talking about this. But BDSM and kink are terms that you might hear interchangeably. You might also hear dominant or Domme, or I think it's pronounced the same way when it's like a woman who is in the dominant role, but sometimes you see it written D-O-M-M-E. Sometimes you see it written D-O-M. Sometimes you just see it written D, or just their name written with a capital letter to signify that this person is in the dominant role. And then there's the submissive role. And a submissive is, you know, exactly what it sounds like. Usually sometimes you'll see their name written with like a lowercase letter to signify that they're a submissive. Sometimes submissives are called slaves, or, you know, like a boy, or even a little, you know, there's many different flavors of this, but something to signify that there's someone who's in charge and there's someone who's being taken charge of. And now, Domme, do you guys have any questions about this, or do you want to talk about why people are turned on by this?
This is an excellent explanation. I thought that was really thorough. No, you can keep going. I mean, yeah, why would somebody like this? I think that's a big question though. I don't know. Maybe we should keep going with like how it's played out.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you why people would like this. I mean, there's a there's a lot of people who do podcasts that are trying to analyze like kink, and they I think they don't understand it. And I was actually like this in the past too. I think I was talking about it on podcasts in the past and I didn't quite understand it, but I have taken the time to educate myself through reading about it and also through personal experience. And, you know, I think that the popularity of something like 50 Shades of Grey speaks to the fact that lots of people, it's a very, very common thing, more common than not, to have some kind of fantasies about power exchange and power play, right? This is why 50 Shades of Grey was so popular. And people are curious about this too. It's kind of dark and mysterious. And, you know, a lot of people like to explore consensual power exchange as a way of kind of like reclaiming their power, right? Because a lot of us are in situations when we're children or whatever, like throughout our lives, where we feel really powerless. Not sexual situations, but necessarily, but just situations where, you know, like you're in a classroom and your teacher is like yelling at you and for no reason, and you feel really powerless, right? Sometimes it's fun when you're an adult to be in a situation where you can choose to give up your power or to take the power and someone is giving it to you. And you can play like kind of a grown-up game of, I don't know, cops and robbers or something like Dan Savage says, with your pants off. Now, some people say that BDSM for them is non-sexual. They are just role-playing with it. And it's not necessarily a sexual thing. It's just something that they feel compelled to do. Maybe because they're using it to kind of explore past feelings or past trauma. And they're doing it now in a consensual way with a partner who's loving and supportive. And it can be very healing in some ways to play with power. So I think, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people say you shouldn't kink shame, right? Because everybody has mostly everybody has some kind of kinkiness to them. And there's also this expression, your kink is not my kink, right? What one person likes, another person might not like. What one person is into and really gets off on, another person might not be into at all. So there's just this kind of attitude of, in the BDSM community, I think, of live and let live. It's a very like, you know, live free or die kind of a libertarian, I think, scene, you know. There's a little bit of overlap there. It's like, okay, your kink is not my kink. As long as it's, another thing you hear is safe, sane, and consensual. Another thing you hear is RAC, risk aware consensual kink. There's a lot of acronyms in this world. So the general idea is like, as long as it's people doing things consensually, consenting adults, and they're aware of what they're doing and they're not hurting anybody else, then yeah, have at it, right? Everything is kind of okay. Okay, so we have some questions from you girls. I'm going to stop and pause and let's talk about them.
Okay, so I feel like while I'm listening to this conversation, I am having a hard time getting along with the normal thing, which I would feel, which is like live and let live, because of the specificity of the question. Because in this case, my friend who was telling me about this, she is not into this at all. And he says he can only be with somebody who's into it. So I feel like it's a coercive situation. And if he can only get off on extreme like BDSM stuff, like the bondage stuff doesn't bother me like a lot. But if he's going to like slap her around and she's not into it, that to me is effed up. And I can't in good conscience suggest that she should proceed in a relationship with him. And that's part of why I'm like bristling slightly listening to you explain what I think are, you know, some really good valid uses of it. And I don't want to let that frustration be muddled up with a larger commentary on voluntary interaction sexually with people who are just both into it. But I think that a man who is really into only that and can only be with somebody like that is a little cracked up. And like, I don't know, you know, and I mean, there are other factors if he's living with another woman and blah, blah, blah. But to me, that just sounds like somebody who could just be a sociopath, like masochist, or whichever the one is where you hurt other people and get pleasure out of it. And that sounds to me unhealthy. That's right. Not like, you know, bondage and like power plays in that way, okay, but this is somebody who's trying to force a lifestyle into somebody that doesn't like it, and the lifestyle happens to be somewhat violent.
Well,
you know?
the entire thing behind really like BDSM and the deeper uses of it is, like Steph was saying, it's about trust, because the whole idea is to explore these exciting kind of dangerous territories with somebody that you trust implicitly. And that's on both sides. That's on the side of the submissive and the Dom, which I've done both of. Again, family, don't listen. But that really is the idea. So in my opinion, if you have somebody who is not interested, who's even, attempted to try it for this person, they're still not into it. It's not something that turns them on. It's not something that makes them feel safe. It kind of exits the realm of what we're talking about and moves a little bit more onto the side of abuse, which is a dangerous thing. And there are plenty of kind of narcissistic abusers in the community who are masquerading under the guise of, oh, I'm into this, or oh, I'm into that. That's not really the whole purpose of the BDSM and the role playing and the bondage and even more extreme types of behavior. At the end of the day, it's really about that safety and trust. And it sounds like she doesn't have it in any way, which is terrifying.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
how I felt about it. Scared, it was just like, this sounds like a really dangerous person. And I'm glad to hear you guys acknowledging it and also sharing your experiences, because I think, look, when you're like with a trusted, loved person that both of you are willing to try it and stuff, but look, and maybe she tries it once. If she's still not into it, that guy sounds like a psycho. And I just want to be clear that people who are listening to this, because, if you're an insecure female or a male for that matter, you can get pressured into all sorts of stuff. And I just want to remind people that you don't have to participate in everything because it's like the most liberal world in the world, Like,
Well,
if it doesn't make you feel good, I think that's scary.
Absolutely. Well, like Lauren said, it is all about trust. And I would add that boundaries are so important in this. This is the defining line between something that's non-consensual or even abusive, or, just forcing some sadist stuff on someone else, and fun play that's consensual and trusting and loving. Is that, when you engage in BDSM play with someone, you're supposed to pre-negotiate before anything sexual starts happening, pre-negotiate what their limits and boundaries are, what they like and don't like, what if they have any medical or health issues that might impact the play, right? Like if they have any limitations, or if they have any emotional triggers, right? That maybe they don't like to be slapped in the face because their mother did that to them or something like that. You need to know about that if you're playing with someone, because you want to give them a good experience. And then also there's the idea of aftercare that goes into it.
Oh,
after you play with someone and exchange power with them, you need a little bit of snuggling or cuddling or loving words and petting and stroking afterwards to just let the person come down, because you do get sort of like a storm of hormones, especially when you're the submissive. You get like this kind of like an altered mental state, right? That comes out of, some people compare it to a runner's high. Some people, when they experience pain, they get this rush of endorphins, or just from the psychological exchange of power, you can get the same thing. And so you need to care for the person after that happens until they're kind of going back to a normal state of mind. And so, yeah, the negotiation and the boundaries is the most important part, because there can be boundary violations with this type of play very easily. So the key thing for especially the person who's in the submissive role is to define their boundaries clearly, talk about what they're going to do before they do it, and also to have a safe word. That's the other thing. You guys probably have heard of this. If you're in the middle of some hot and heavy BDSM play, and the dominant, and you're the submissive, and the dominant does something that hurts you, or that feels uncomfortable, or that you just don't like and you're not into, or that triggers you, whatever, if you want to stop for any reason, you should be talking with them about a word that you can say that takes you out of the scene and says, hey, stop. We need to, time out. Let's talk about this, or stop. And sometimes people make it a funny word like pineapple or blueberry pie or something like that.
I've used pineapple.
Really? I think that's a common one. Some people use a light system, like yellow means caution and red means stop. Some people, I don't know. It's really up to you what you use as a safe word. And then also there's the concept of, what if someone is, for example, gagged and they can't speak? What do they do as a safe word? Do they wave their hand? Do they ring a bell? Do they, do something else? So you need to negotiate that before the scene. And that's what makes the difference between BDSM play that's fun and consensual and has good boundaries, and something that's not consensual or boundaried or really even negotiated.
Exactly. And there's also the idea of how serious is your play, right? I've been in situations where it's been pretty serious play, but even without using a safe word, we're both comfortable kind of breaking the moment with one of us saying, hey, are you okay? And then it's like, yeah, I'm fine. And then you keep going. It's kind of discussing that ahead of time. Like, do you want to break character, or are we going to be ourselves and just having fun? It's again, all part of that negotiation. How do you want this kind of session to go? Do you want it to be a session? Do you want it to just be fun and light? Do you want it to be a little bit dark and heavy and you're somebody else while you're playing? It's all part of that same negotiation. It all has to be discussed ahead of time. That's really the bottom line.
So these are good points, but even if it's consensual, I would say, is there a line that, let's say you have a friend and they have visible bad bruises, cuts, like burn marks. I mean, let's say it's getting really crazy and they look like they've been in a war or something. I mean, is there a point where it does become society's business, or at least a friend or family member's business, to be like, yo, are you getting beaten? What's happening over here? Because maybe that person has psychological issues that they think that they're okay with this, but it really means that they don't love themselves and they could maybe deal with some like actual therapy, and this might not be like, maybe it's going too far. Is there a too far if it's not you and the other like if you're not one of the two people involved or whatever?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can speak to that. So, sometimes when people have visible bruises or something on their body, it means that they're being abused. Sometimes when someone has bruises, that is part of their play to get bruises, and it doesn't actually hurt them too much. Like there are some toys that can contribute to bigger bruising, and that's something that they like. If they like that, they should tell you, and they should be able to clearly explain it.
But you're their friend, just like for clarity in this situation, you're not their lover. Like, do they have to tell their friend that they really like getting hit with like really like metal rods and stuff? You know what I mean? Like that.
Well, I mean, I would think that if this is part of someone's play, they would probably have bruises like on their ass maybe, and you wouldn't be able to see it unless they're wearing a bathing suit, right? If they have a black eye, that's a whole other matter. And they say they fell down the stairs, then that's, get help.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think some people are into getting punched in the face even. Like, I mean, I don't know. I saw that show once. It's like the lamest thing. But I mean, I think that people are sometimes into some more violent stuff. I just wonder if that is ever like going too far, even if it's consensual with the two of them. What do you think, Laura?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be judgmental about it at all because I've done it, but I've never done it in that violent way. So just to be completely honest and transparent, I don't really understand the need for violence or to inflict violence on it. So I would probably ask, I mean, if somebody has a black eye, regardless of what they're into, I'm going to try to find out if they're okay. But God, it's really tricky. I mean, does that step into abuse territory? I mean, technically no, if it's something that they like, right? But if they're getting hurt, seriously hurt, maybe it is time to have a conversation with them and just talk to that person and just kind of see try to gauge what's going on in their head, what's going on when they play, if they're open to talking about it. But I don't know. I mean, it's really, really tricky. Like, do you step in any further when it is something that is completely consensual? Not really.
I would say that if someone is engaging in getting bruises and marks on their body as part of consensual play, they're usually going to do that in non-visible areas so that they don't alarm their friends and coworkers. So unless you're looking at their butt for some reason and you see that it's black and blue, and then you ask them about that, right? It's a different thing if you have marks in areas that are visible, like the face or the hands or something like that. But then again, sometimes abusers leave bruises purposely in places where people don't see it because they don't want their abuse to be uncovered. So I think it's more like it's talking to your friend and seeing like, what is the situation? I think your intuition will be your best guide there.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's just a matter of getting that feel from the first discussion or maybe the fifth discussion. But just if you're talking to somebody who has a giant bruise on their face and they're telling you that their significant other is into violent sex and they're not, that's a giant red flag. I mean, that's probably a time where you can at least step in verbally and have a talk with them, like a gentle, empathetic talk to kind of feel out what's happening there. And do they need help? Do they want help?
And here are the red flags, like between BDSM and something that's abusive. Like if you're having sex with someone and you don't talk about this beforehand and they just suddenly start choking you, that's not BDSM. That's effed up.
Yeah, that's violent sex.
They can't just spring it on you in the middle of sex. It has to be something that you talk about before and you have a safe word. And also some people say that choking is just never safe. And, there's probably a debate about that, but some people really just stay away from anything that involves breath play.
Well, you're also talking about with a lot of BDSM physical things. And I think what a lot of people tend to forget, or if they're not involved in, doing it in any capacity, it's usually an almost clinical discussion that you're having ahead of time.
It's non-sexual.
It's very non-sexual. Like, what do you like? If you're into choking, do you want me to press gently? Do you want me to hold your neck but not squeeze it? There's so many different things and intricacies with it. I mean, personally, a couple years back, I was dating somebody who was a very sweet guy, and we weren't into any kind of play. It was just a normal kind of vanilla sex relationship. And he slapped me in the face. I broke up with him. I was like, this is not okay. First of all, for me personally, I'm never okay with being slapped in the face. Right? Everybody has a different thing. For me, it felt incredibly degrading. Even if we had talked about it ahead of time, that's not something I would have been into. Again, I wouldn't want to slap someone in the face. There's plenty of other places you can slap. And for me, the face is just not one of them. And he was really taken aback and felt really bad, but it didn't matter to me. It was done at that point. Like, that is a boundary. I don't care if you've seen it in porn. I don't care if you've done it with your ex. You can't just slap someone in the face and expect they're going to like it.
Exactly.
So, right.
You have to have your jaw closed too, because you can do damage if the person's jaw is open. And that's definitely, I'm glad you set a boundary there, Lauren, because that's definitely like crossing a line.
It really is. I mean, and there's some things that people, now that I'm thinking about it, I've had predominantly good sexual experiences, but I've had a couple that have stood out. I had somebody, this was many years back, again, seemed like a very nice, kind lover. He spit on me. Ooh. And I stopped
that's got to be like, come on, dude. You can't possibly think that that's going to go over well.
Right? And in that moment, I was like, stop, nope. And he was aggressively pursuing me after that, and I would never see him again. Like, there's some people are into degradation. There's definitely parts of, BDSM where people like it. I'm not into it. So that's why you have to talk about it. I mean, there are a lot of things that need to be discussed. And I also think if you're open to trying something once, when you've talked about it and there are boundaries, there's lines, you've made the rules, you have your safe word, great, go for it. If you don't like it, there is no need for you to ever do it again. There's no need to put your safety and your self-esteem on the line for somebody else who's into that, at least in my opinion. If you don't like it, right? You don't like it, you don't like it. Sex can be very emotionally fulfilling, very emotionally damaging if it's on the other end of the spectrum. And saying that you're going to do something that you're not into that includes humiliation in any capacity, I mean, that's damaging for years. That's something that sticks with you.
You also are not required to try anything, right?
Like, you're not. Agreed. Hugely
right. The friend who's dating the guy who's into it, right? Like, if he's pressuring her in any way to try something that she already knows she's not interested in, that's a red flag.
I agree. And she's already got enough problems. You know what I mean? Last thing she needs is this, like, to become a fetish. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's just...
okay, wait. So I want to, we could keep with this depressingness, but I want to add a little bit of color to this conversation.
Yes, please.
Okay. So in college, I had a party once, and I had a really sassy male friend who was a real fucking asshole. So he and I had a little bit of a flirt, but like, whatever. He was just being an a-hole, and I slapped him. And all of a sudden, all the men in the party, they're like, college kids, guys, they all loved it. And they all ended up like kind of like lining up for me to slap them in the face.
Wow.
It was the best thing ever. So many years later, I slept with somebody, and I've noticed that men like slapped in the face. Like, I don't do it a lot, but like whenever I've done it goes over great. And not always like even in a sexual situation. It could just be like anywhere. They like it. It's fucked up. So I was with somebody in bed, and they said something that was really gross and inappropriate and like completely out of left field and bad. And so I did it. And that makes me think, like, is there a double standard? Because he obviously liked that too. It's a gross animal, but like, I mean, did I just do something really bad, or is there a frame? You know what I mean? Is it bad if a man slaps a woman and like, cause he didn't consent, like we didn't have a serious discussion about it. I would have preferred if he kept that gross comment to himself. It was just weird and out of place. So I just like, without thinking, I like just snapped, and it wasn't hard or anything, but am I a predator now?
No.
Well, those guys who were lining up, they were asking for it. And I'm not saying that in like they were asking for it. Like, they were saying, yes, please. I want that. And that sounds like an awesome, fun experience that could be really empowering. But the guy who just said, yeah, but the guy who just said this comment and then you were so shocked and you reacted by slapping him. I mean, I don't know if that were me, like you did not talk about that. You talked about it neither way, right? He did the shocking thing first that he didn't talk to you about, hey, is this okay? Correct. And then you did something that shocked him back. And so maybe there were boundary violations on both sides. I would say the first time someone violates a boundary like that, you can give them a warning, right? And say like, hey, I don't like that, or stop, we're done here or whatever. But if they do it again, then it crosses into, okay, they're violating a known boundary. And that's when you really need to stop that interaction.
Yeah. I mean, it was like instinct because what he said was just so like, what the hell are you talking about? Like it was so inappropriate. And I just like, it was like a reaction. I don't know.
Right. It just happened.
He was kind of like he wasn't like the most, prude guy. You know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't like church boy.
Yeah. Well, it's like you can't assume that all men like to be slapped in the face during sex. It may be like
that's true. But this guy, I mean, you could kind of tell. I mean, I didn't think of that in advance, but it wasn't like I don't know. Anyway,
well, I wanted to bring up that there's also kind of different flavors and levels of BDSM because there are those people that are in the lifestyle, right? It's their sexual lifestyle. This is what they do all the time. This is how they have sex.
Sometimes it's even beyond the bedroom. It's 24/7. So like someone is a slave all the time and they love that and they almost never break out of that role.
Exactly. But then there's also plenty of people, and I'm thinking about your friend in particular, Tatiana, and some other people too. I think that it's also, I know that it's also a part of regular lifestyles too that have nothing to do with outside the bedroom that actually are maybe like 20% of the time that people are even having sex. And it's something that can be a fun kind of playful thing as well. And I think at least for me, when I was younger, I assumed people that were into bondage or BDSM, like they're in a dungeon and there are like tons of people around and they're swapping partners. And that is a very specific lifestyle that people are choosing. That is not everybody. And to continue on that line, there's not a specific set way that you have to play. I mean, there are plenty of people, plenty of men who are interested in being dominant, but are also interested in being submissive and are maybe a little bit more, fluid with their play in that way. And same with women. I mean, I've done both. Yes. I've been with guys who have done both. And it's a very interesting dynamic because it can be really fun, especially if you're with the same person and they're into going both ways. You get to see such different sides of their personality and vice versa. It's like, oh, wait a second. When he was being a little bit more dominant, he was this guy. And now look at this. Like I'm in control of him and he loves it. It's a really interesting thing to play around with. And maybe I'm not sure. I don't really know if that's a less common thing, but I don't think it's this set way that you have to be within the community. Like BDSM is by no means a lifestyle for me or my partner or anybody I've been with in the past, but with the people I've experimented with, I've seen all kinds of different things. And I think that's one of the fun things about playing and sex and just kind of exploring is that you can have, two sides. There are two sides to a coin. You can play with both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's room for anything that you want to make it. Like the possibilities are kind of endless, right? There's room for playing with gender. There's room for, getting multiple people involved in scenes. There's room for monogamy. There's room for marriage. There's room for all kinds of things if you want to just play with it 20% of the time you have sex, or if you want to make it into a lifestyle, right? So there's room for all kinds of stuff. But Lauren, you were saying that it's fun to experience both sides of the coin within the same person, right? Oh, and yeah. I agree with that. I think that one of the things you hear in the BDSM community a lot is that it makes you a better dominant. Like if you want to be a dominant, you should first try being submissive and experiencing the things being done to you that you would like to do to someone else, because that gives you empathy for your submissive and it makes you just understand what it feels like when someone is doing this to you. And so you can be better at doing it to someone else. And I really liked that. I thought that was, I think that definitely applies. I would say even outside of BDSM, within the context of just heterosexual sexual relationships, yeah. I think that men should experience what it's like to be penetrated, because usually they don't experience that role during sex, but experiencing it can give them empathy for their partner who they want to penetrate, and it can show them how vulnerable it feels, and it can just educate them about what they want to do to someone else.
Oh yeah. I mean, do ladies watch Broad City?
No.
What's that?
It's not on anymore, but it was the funniest show on Comedy Central, and one of the characters is asked by this guy that she's been with for she's been in love with for like 2 years of the show. And he's this very masculine man. He's super handsome. He's really handy. He does stuff around the building. He's that kind of like virile, heterosexual, manly man. And when he finally tells her he's into her, she discovers that he loves being pegged. That's his fantasy. And
what is pegging, Lauren, for people who don't know?
Pegging is when the opposite person is penetrating. So in a heterosexual relationship, it would be the woman putting on a strap-on or a dildo and penetrating her partner. She's terrified. She doesn't know how to do it. And she tells her best friend, and her best friend's reaction is pure joy. Her best female friend. She's like, you just hit the jackpot. This is the dream man. This is the man that wants to feel and have you feel. Like, this is the man that's open with his sexuality, who wants to know what it's like to, get it. And it was such an interesting reaction from somebody who was terrified to somebody who was like, no, this is it. You've hit the apex of manhood. And I think that kind of goes along a lot with BDSM things too. I mean, I don't know that I would put that in a BDSM category, but it also goes along with maybe a woman thinking that she always likes being submissive, or she doesn't know. Maybe she's submissive during vanilla sex and she thinks that's something that she would like when they're playing with BDSM, and does a role reversal and turns out that she actually loves being the more dominant partner. It's really kind of an exploration of yourself, right? I mean, you're discovering what makes you feel good, what makes your partner feel good. Maybe your partner sees you as a dominant. You don't see yourself that way. When you finally do it and they get to see you in their mind in all of your glory, I mean, that's probably an incredibly sexy feeling.
It's so fun to step into the different roles. And sometimes you just feel it. You're just like, I'm feeling very submissive today, or I'm feeling very dominant today. And I want to explore that more. And this can feel so good to have these different sides of yourself be seen, especially by your partner. It can really increase intimacy. And, this is why I like it. This is why I like it, because it is an increase in intimacy if you're doing it right in a way that's healthy and supportive for everybody. And it can really be a way to get to know yourself better as well as your partner, and to just experience the feeling of being empowered, or the feeling of freedom that you get through giving up control to someone else that you really trust and having them take the driver's seat. It feels really nice when you can do that and trust that it's going to be okay. It's just like, that feels nice. I want someone else to take charge for a little bit. I make all the decisions in my life, and I'd like to just lay back for a little while and have someone else drive. And that can feel really great. And it also can feel really empowering to be the one who's in the driver's seat and who gets to call all the shots and make all the decisions. And it doesn't have to involve pain. That's another thing that another misconception about BDSM that a lot of people have. They think it's going to hurt, right? And if you don't want it to hurt, it doesn't have to hurt. You can do so much with just storytelling and dirty talking and other types of sensory play that are not painful, like, dragging a feather or a soft plushie over someone's body. That's not painful, but that can be involved with power exchange too. And and just to bring it full circle, we were talking about why do people like this at the beginning of the show. There's a lot of people who say you shouldn't analyze that too much, because that can ruin it for some people, right? If they feel like they're being analyzed. Some people don't want to think about why they like BDSM or kink. They just do, and they accept themselves. And I'm here to say that that's fine. If that's you, more power to you. Enjoy it, right? Enjoy it without overthinking it too much. If you're interested in thinking about it, it can also be an interesting self-knowledge experience and increase intimacy with your partner and get to know yourself better by thinking about, why do I like this, right? So I'm not here to judge. Whatever you want to do as far as thinking about why people like this or why you like this is okay. And I don't know, just have fun out there and make sure you set your boundaries and be consensual. That's what Auntie Stephanie says.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. Do what you like. Everyone likes different things. Just make sure it's consensual, safe, that you're both on the same page. At the end of the day, have that discussion, set those boundaries, make those rules, whatever it is you're into, even if it's something, I personally wouldn't do myself. If that's something that you're into, enjoy it. Why not? Sex. It should be fun and intimate.
All right, guys. That was a great episode of Proof of Love. You can listen to us on Fridays at proofoflovecast.com. We're on the LTB network and a bunch of others. So you can listen to us on Spotify, iTunes. You could subscribe. You could tell a friend. Thanks so much for joining us. We're entering our second year of Proof of Love, or actually, we're coming up on our 1 year anniversary. So keep an eye out, tell a friend, and thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.
Show me your heart. I know that it's beating. Tell me that you love me too. true. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love.
Thank you for listening to Proof of Love. Please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Proof of Lovecast. More episodes can be found at proofoflovecast.com. And make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. You are listening to Proof of Love with Tatiana Moroz, Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and Lauren Kasovitz. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on Proof of Love is intended as financial advice, legal advice, therapy, or really anything other than entertainment. Please take everything that you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're hearing us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on, or of any of the sponsors or affiliate products that you may hear about on the show. Proof of Love has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond.